How do I move my recovery from my head to my heart?
Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers.
We're therapists.
And we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin.
Brannon, you're looking good today, man.
Oh, thanks, bro.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. The only reason is I went to the gym today and my hair's wet as I'm coming in. So it looks like
you look like you're like movie star with that one curl right up in the front there. For anyone who's listening, you have to go over to YouTube and watch Brannon because he's looking sharp today.
Just because my hair's wet and my hair's curly. My one good feature is my hair.
The natural curl, man.
Anything else, forget about it. You're looking good today too. The salt and pepper beard, just
the
rocking
usual.
it, man. You're aging like a fine wine. You're just
my daughter has told me that this beard, whatever level I keep it at, this beard makes me look like I'm 20 years older.
Yeah.
So I don't think they meant that as a compliment.
No, it's like distinguished. It's like, yeah. Yeah. I was watching one of your Instagram reels the other day and you were smiling and I know you have like the fake teeth. And I was like, with the fake teeth and the beard, like, dude, he's looking old.
Hey. lived a hard life, and
lived it though. We've
lived a hard, full life, and that's what I want. So
that's absolutely yes. You might not make it 5 more years, but you lived it hard.
It'll be a full one.
Yeah. So, anyways, let's dive in here with our guest. So, Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
If you could give us a little bit of background, just we don't need your full autobiography, but enough to understand what's going on with you, and then just ask any questions that you have.
Yeah. So I got introduced to pornography really early on into my life. I think I was around 8 years old, and I just fell right into it, and so I just grew up with it, and it's always been there. It's always been a part of my life. And for the longest time, it's just screwed up the way that I see the world and the way that I feel. And so I would think that that's pretty, unfortunately, I would think that that's pretty common. So I've recently, about 3 years ago, I got married and I got really serious about recovery. And I've been working hard. I've made some big strides in the last 2 years. My wife and I moved out of state for 2 years, and that got really hard. And that's where it came down to, do I want to lose my family for this, or do I want to reclaim my life and earn my family, earn their trust? And I made the choice to earn them back, to work really hard for it. And so for the last year, I've been hitting it hard. I've been going to group meetings. I've been going to ARP meetings, and I get frustrated. I've been getting really frustrated and frankly quite depressed, to be honest, because I feel like no matter how hard I try, no matter how long I try, I just seem to keep falling off the wagon. And it doesn't feel like, despite having 30 days of recovery or 3 days of recovery, it doesn't feel any different. I still want it really bad, all the time. And I wanted to know from you two, when does, like you said earlier, when does it change from my head to my heart? When do I feel the effects of recovery really take place? And how can I really lean into the pain of wanting it and just deal with it, so then hopefully those effects do take place and I can recognize those instead of constantly worrying and focusing on the pain of the problem, the pain of the addiction?
Great question, Andy. I'd love to just maybe ask you another question as to, you said you've been kind of working at this for about 3 years, kind of really concertedly. Within the last year, you've really been putting your kind of heart and soul into it. You did say, I've made a bunch of changes. You don't necessarily see those changes or they don't feel any better. I guess that's part of one of the questions. And then the other question is, why? Why are you putting in the effort that you are? Why are you wanting and trying to make the changes? Like, what are your motivations for the changes you're trying to make?
Well, the changes that I have made are just giving up things that I recognize that the majority of my triggers come from just wanting to escape, and I think that that is exactly the soul of this addiction or addictions, is that you want to escape the realities of life, the pains of life. And that's the story of my life. Basically, I've had it so easy all my life. And now once I get married, now I'm the grown up, now I'm the big boy. Now I have to grow up and, do everything. So, my motivation is so that I don't lose my wife. I've been telling myself growing up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I've always wanted to be a dad. I've always wanted to be a good person. I've always wanted to be that person that's dependable and reliable. I don't see that in me, though. Constantly giving into the temptation of pornography and masturbation, I don't see that person coming out. I haven't seen him. I haven't seen myself evolve into that. And that's what I want. My motivation is to become that person that I know I can become, that man that I want to be. And for my wife, for myself, for my future kids, those are my motivations, to be that man and to earn my wife's trust, to have her be able to look at me and say, I know he'll do it. I know he can do that. In my group meetings, something that really stuck to me was what my therapist had said. She said that you become an esteemable person by doing esteemable things. I don't see me doing that, though. If I'm constantly falling into this rut and not feeling the effects of my recovery, am I really esteemable? Am I really doing esteemable things? And I deal a lot with rigid thinking. I'm terrible with rigid thinking. So I think that that's another issue that I have right now. But I know I'm incredibly verbose. Did any of that make sense? Did that answer your question?
I think you answered the question. If I were to boil it down really quickly, you basically started by saying, I don't want to lose my wife. And so
Right.
there's one of your motivations is the fear of lost, which I think is a really normal one. But then you also started to turn as you were talking, you were also starting to say that you're looking at yourself and saying, I want to be an honest person. I want to be an esteemable person. I want to be the kind of husband and father that my wife and my children deserve. I want to be what's in my mind respectable and someone who has self-discipline.
Exactly.
That's what I'm hearing you say. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that for most people, there's a number of different levels of motivation that people find. And the people who are coerced into it have a more uphill battle than the person who not only is coerced into it, but actually starts to look at it from a perspective of, I'm not just running from a problem and trying to prove that I'm not a schmuck. I actually am moving to a place where I can grow into a life that I want to live. And I'm hearing both elements in what you just said. I'm wondering what fuel source you're operating from more often, the fear-based one or the love-based one?
Most definitely the fear-based.
There's a concept here, and to help you see this today, what Tyler just said, you have to understand it and feel it. And so a couple things. You did something that's interesting to me. You said, I've had recovery for 3 days. I've had recovery for 30 days. Like, sounds like you're interchanging, you're inserting recovery for sobriety.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. There's a big problem with that. Do you know what the problem is?
No.
You'll never get to recovery that way, ever. Because your worth and your value is about proving it, is about working harder to earn it. And then you talked about being an esteemable person. And it sounds like your therapist even drove this home of you have to do these good things in order to be that type of person. Andy, I want to ask you, how does an acorn become an oak tree?
It's planted, it's nurtured, it's watered, it's fed, it's
Okay.
given time to grow.
But how does that little thing start to turn into this massive like tree? It's just like this little thing. It's just this. How does it know to like grab the nutrients from the soil and to suck up the water? And how does it know how to do that?
I guess that's just a part of its nature. That's
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Do you and your nature? So here you are, 8 years old, raised in the church. Do you come from a big family?
No, it's just my brother and my mom and I.
Okay. Okay. Somewhere along the way, you lost sight or of an understanding of what your true nature is. And now here you are married, and it's, well, I need to prove myself into being okay, not understanding what your true nature actually is. In fact, really being deceived about what that is and who you are. You've been deceived along the way. And now you get married, you put this sobriety thing in front of you, and it's like, okay, I have this opportunity to prove it. I can prove it. And then you go through the cycles again and again and again, and you'll fall again and again and feel like a piece of shit again and again because you can't quite prove it. And instead of becoming a big, massive oak tree, you're withering. You're like barely surviving.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Right? But trying to grow like further toward the sun, but then just withering away. Right? So, like Tyler was saying, like your whole paradigm of recovery needs to flip on its head from top down healing to bottom up, to understanding from the bottom up who you are first and foremost, which then drives your motivation. And what do you know? Sobriety is a byproduct of that. You don't seek for the validation. You don't seek. Do you understand what I'm saying, Andy?
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I'm I I'm hearing what you're saying. I did actually get a little off in my head about something. You said you were talking about healing, and I know that this is off topic of what you were just saying now, but
Oh, this is fine.
This is something that I've been struggling with as well. I feel like I'm a problem to be fixed and not a person to be healed. I don't feel like I deserve to be healed. I think I'm deserving of fixing the problem, getting it done, and getting it done quick. You know,
hear it.
Where did all that come from, Andy? Because that's you're actually getting deeper into the roots. I guess maybe before we go there, I want to back up to something Brannon said really quickly, and I want Brannon to just make sure clarify this a little bit. So, in essence, Brannon, when you heard Andy talking, this is the first time we've ever met Andy, and he's talking about, I want to be this kind of a man. I want to be a man that my wife can rely on. I want to be a man who has discipline. I want to be a man who has his children and lives his principles, and I want to be all of those things. You could actually hear in what Andy was saying, Brannon, and maybe you heard it differently, that is the acorn. Like
Yeah.
it's already there. It's already built into you, Andy. And then you go and you take a core belief system and throw it over the top that taints all of it.
Yeah.
It's like, unless I go to this many meetings a week, unless I stay sober, unless I do this, unless I do that. And instead, the acorn on the inside is just going, I want to be a good man. Like I want to go and provide for my family, and I want to live with integrity, and I want to become this person that I know God has designed me to be. And then you go and place the stipulations as to whether you're successful or you fail, and it stunts the growth of the innate part of you. You know, it's if Brannon asked this question, I want to ask you, Andy, like you said you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's specific doctrine about who you actually are, like who you were designed to be. And who is that?
I have a hard time accepting it, but I know that it is to be a son of God and to ultimately become like my Father in heaven. And that's the hardest thing for me to accept. I can't look at myself in the mirror and say that that's true. It's hard.
But
It's really hard.
If you were the acorn, God is the oak tree, and you're saying you believe that on a rational level, that
Exactly.
you won't allow your heart to accept that.
Yeah.
But something you need to be cautious of is ultimately to become like my Father in heaven. That sets you up for striving to be perfect. And what it does is it removes the atonement from it all. It's you're going to atone for your own sins. You're going to be the best you possibly can be. And so it's like, I got to prove myself. And you said it earlier. You said, I need to earn it. I'm not worthy of it. Right. Tyler and I, Andy, we've met you for 20 minutes here. And I felt two things from you in 20 minutes. I felt a lot of shame, a lot of like not knowing who you are, but I have felt your innate goodness. Like I can tell that you're a good man with a good heart that's naturally already there. Like that is there. Just like the acorn in some ways is already the oak tree. Because it's its essence. It knows how to step into that, right? Tyler, I'm sure you felt that too, right?
100%, Brannon. And I think you're bringing out a good point that I want to just bring back a little bit because there's a dialectic here. Is that when you are the acorn and God is the oak tree, the goal is perfection. The problem is that we look at it as when we're not perfect and we're still the acorn, that means we're no good. That means we'll never measure up. That means this and that and the other. And that's what Brannon's getting at is the dialectic is there's something inside of you that's going to want to chase perfection. You have to learn to accept that that part of you is there while also accepting your humanity and knowing that you're not perfect and you're going to make mistakes. And according to Christian doctrine, that is the whole reason why Jesus Christ did what he did. Is that he bridged the gap between your imperfection with the drive to want to grow to perfection. And most of us cut out Christ and we put the blame all on ourselves when we're not perfect. And then it robs us of all of the stuff that we would naturally lean into doing because it's already built into us. And it makes me think of that quote, Brannon. You can correct me if I'm missing what you were trying to say, but that Vince Lombardi quote that says, we will chase perfection, not that perfection in this life is attainable, but in chasing perfection, we will catch excellence. And it's that acceptance of both that I'm going to do my very best, but I'm going to give over the outcome. The measuring stick is now in my heart, letting the acorn do what it's built to do, rather than measuring 30 days of sobriety or 60 days of sobriety or whatever else it is, because that's not the actual target.
Right.
It can't be for the right heart.
We miss the whole, like, if I use shame and fear in order to strive for perfection, is that healthy? Am I doing something good for myself? I wake up in the morning, I do all these good things because I have a lot of shame. Is that good for me?
Well, it hasn't been working so far, so I would think so.
Right? So I'm using fear, control, shame to like read my scriptures and exercise and I got to play with my kids every day because dang it, like I feel guilty and shameful.
Better be a good dad.
I don't. So in the end, if I do all of those things, how am I gonna resonate? Like, how am I gonna feel in this world, and what am I gonna create?
Right.
I'm still gonna resonate in shame because in fact, I'm using shame all the time. Now, somebody who's done that a lot, they don't really know or understand that there's good motivation outside of shame. There's good motivation outside of fear. And so what is that? What could that be? What could motivate you without you striving to be perfect, without you striving to be better? What could that be, Andy?
I really don't know because I feel like I can't see outside of my shame and being so scared all the time.
Yeah.
I really have no idea.
Can I ask you a question, Andy?
Yeah.
And maybe you don't have, just there may not be a good answer to this. If you were to think back in your life to any time or place where you felt like you did not deserve love, but felt it anyway, have you ever had an experience like that?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about one of those.
Um, one was a more recent one was when I was admitting to my wife a streak of bad choices to use. And as you can imagine, over the last 3 years, we've only been married for 3 years. Over the last 3 years, we've had some really bad fights and bouts over it. And this time around, as she's matured and grown and been strengthened through this experience, through this situation, she looked at me and she said, okay, it is what it is. And she was full of grace. That was one more recent one. Another time was when, like I said, I've been dealing with this all my life and I was on my mission. And, I was really having a really hard time the night before going and doing my first baptism for a family. I didn't feel worthy to wield the priesthood or perform that ordinance with my companion, and yet I did. And after having baptized all of them, I truly believe that I felt the sealing witness from the Spirit that it was true and that it was a good ordinance. And I did not believe that I was worthy to do that, and yet I was still used to do that. And those are two experiences that really jut out to me. And it's interesting you ask that, because I've thought so many times while struggling with this question that I've asked you guys, how can I know that it's working? That's another thing that keeps me coming back to, well, maybe it is possible. Maybe I am actually moving on and getting better and becoming more, growing from this. Is that I've had experiences like that, and I don't think, as far you said, you mentioned rational thinking, I just can't rationalize how, if incredible experiences like that happen to me, whom I deem not a worthy person of such, what does that mean? So that's something that keeps me from really going over the edge, really just giving up and not doing it anymore. Because what's the point? I keep screwing up. I can't be a good guy. I can't be a good person. Anyway. So
Maybe it's just so different than this. I mean, you're giving us your belief system, how you're operating. Maybe it's just so different than that. Maybe you are good right now, today, as you are. Maybe you are loved. Maybe you don't need to earn anything. Maybe you're okay right now. And without, however sober you are or not sober you are. I want to ask you, Andy, where's your dad? What's going on with dad?
he's not in the picture. My mom and dad. My mom divorced my dad before my brother and I were born, and I've really not had much contact with him. I mean, I know who he is and I know where he lives, and I've spent time with him before, but ultimately my brother and I chose to, leave that relationship behind. And so
Long time ago.
uh no, actually it was in the last 2 years that I decided to cut ties with him. And like I would see him maybe once or twice a year before that. And so it's just, you live without somebody for so long and you just learn to not really need that relationship, I guess.
What did not having your dad there, not having your dad fight for you, be in the family, how did that inform you in terms of who you believe you are? Do you understand my question? Like what?
I think so.
Yeah.
Um, well, the more I think about that, as I'm thinking about that, something's coming up. I've always had this fear as you'd imagine, between a divorced couple, one says one thing about the other, and the other says this about that person. And my mom didn't paint a great picture about him, but objectively speaking, it was a pretty bad situation. But I guess he's changed over the years. I I've always had this impending fear, this doom, that if I make bad choices, then I'm going to end up like him.
Hmm.
And I mentioned that to my wife, that he cheated on my mom and he was physically abusive. And my wife, in her hurt, I'm giving her credit, in her hurt and feeling anguish, and like she had nowhere to go, no one to talk to about it. She didn't want to embarrass me, so she never talked to anybody about my problems. This was when we first got married, our first year, and that was hell on earth. That was so hard. When I had admitted once to her that I was hiding my laptop and using, she screamed that out to me and said, "You're becoming like your dad. I can see it." She's never met my dad, but just in her hurt, she screamed that. And that really sent me over. So uh, I think what him not being in my life has been is having this, I think that's really dug into me, that single-mindedness, that rigid thinking, that if you screw up, bam, you're like him.
Yeah.
If you do this, bam, guess what? You look like him now. You sound like him. You talk like him. You walk like him. And even right now, it makes my skin crawl. I don't want to be like that person. That person that was explained to me, that was painted to me. I don't know really much about him anyway, but just that image and other images as I've grown older. Of things, of people that I really don't want to become. That I guess that is the picture of my fear. If I keep slipping up, if I keep feeling this way, if I entertain a thought, you're gonna have to walk 100 miles before you can
Mhm.
get back to ground zero. That's how I feel. So I guess just not having a man around made it twice as hard. I don't know.
Mhm.
There's a couple of things that are kind of coming out here a little bit. Do you like any sports or anything, Andy? You watch any sports?
Yeah, I like basketball.
Okay, you'll just enough to understand this concept. Have you ever watched a game where the team you're rooting for gets up by like 30 points, 20 points? The game's pretty much over, and then they start playing not to lose instead of just playing the way they were to win. And then
Right.
and then eventually the other team comes back and overtakes them because they changed the way that they're playing to not lose. And in your situation, you have an interesting thing with what Brannon just asked, that you look up and on the horizon, you see a father figure who you desperately do not want to be like. And you're so it's okay to notice that and say, I don't want to be like that. But you're so hyper focused on that picture of him in the horizon that it's kind of like this, like when you ride horses. What you do when you ride a horse is you have a whole bunch of body language cues that you use, but part of the cue you use is you're not supposed to look at the horse. You look out ahead where you want to go, and the horse senses where your eyes are going because of the way you hold your body, and the horse moves in that direction naturally. And that's what we do as human beings, is wherever we place our focus, we naturally gravitate towards that space. So now what you've got is this hell that you're in because you're like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like that. And it's like this tractor beam is sucking you in to being that. And it's because you're so hyper focused on not being that instead of going, yeah, I don't want to go there, and then looking for a new target, something that's driven by a different kind of motivation that Brandon was talking about.
Mhm.
One that's driven more from out of love and acceptance rather than fear and compulsion. And it's hard to shift that. It's
Really
really
hard.
difficult to shift that.
Uh,
Um,
yeah.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I was just gonna say the work. Like, I think you're shooting at the wrong target when it comes to recovery. I put that in quotes. I think the work to be done here, like to get yourself to a place of forgiveness and compassion for your father. He does have a story, and your father has as much worth as you have, and your father is beautiful in the eyes of God. I know I'm saying these things, but like to actually do that work, to let go of all these stories around him, it doesn't mean you have to have lunch with him every day. But in doing that toward him, you would be doing it for yourself as well. And you would be letting go of so much about who you are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
You wouldn't have to be best friends or talk to him anymore. You could still not be like him, but coming to that acceptance of his value and being equal to your value in the sight of God would be a huge piece of surrender of your own burden that you're carrying.
Wow. I never thought of that. Gosh, that's tough.
Yeah. That's the deeper work. It's easier to focus on not touching your penis than it is to focus on like trying to love your dad.
Yeah.
I've got to figure out how to keep boundaries with dad, but still love him with everyone, with every person.
Right. Right. Okay.
I want to ask you, to kind of shift gears just a little bit. Do you know how you build trust with your wife? Like how do you build trust with your wife?
Um, oh man, I think this is going to sound like everything else that I've said.
This is a setup. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Don't use, tell her everything, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, why I'm thinking about it, why I'm feeling about it, and be totally fine with talking about it for 5 hours straight, not getting upset, doing all my chores, go to work every day and put a smile on my face. That's kind of what I think.
Oh man, I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Like I know Tyler. Well, I'll let Tyler go first. Go ahead, Tyler.
Well, no, I mean, I think again, we're back to the acorn versus the oak a little bit. Like, yeah, you want to be open with your wife, you want to be honest, you want to be able to provide, you want to go do all of that, but you think that doing all of that will make you good enough for her to trust you.
Exactly.
And that's not where Brannon's going.
No, the like when you say don't use, you're absolutely consuming her for your self-worth. I need to get compliant. I need to be a good boy. I need to do all these things to be good enough to be a good boy so that she thinks that I'm a good man.
Right.
So, and what she'll feel from you is your weakness, and she'll feel unstable. She'll feel unsafe with a man who's always trying to prove himself to her. She is not your God. She does not give you your self-worth. What actually builds safety is for you to do that underneath work, know who you are, learn how to show up actually authentic in the relationship, with confidence, with strength, and to be able to sit in the discomfort of her pain. She might not like some of the things that you say or do, but for you to be there with her as she doesn't like that,
Right.
versus trying to make sure that she's never uncomfortable. Because if she's uncomfortable, that means that I'm not okay, and I don't have her approval. Therefore, my self-worth goes out the drain. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
So it's the same thing. Coming back, I know I shifted from your dad talk, but these actually play together. Is when you forgive yourself, when you know yourself and you love yourself and understand how good you are, you stop showing up codependent with her and using her for your self-worth. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So when I say the wrong target, if the target is the laundry list of the things that you should do to make her happy, that's not recovery. That's actually harmful to actual recovery.
Dang.
It doesn't mean the things you're doing are bad. It means the motivation needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, like I talk to so many different wives about this very same topic, and they'll say something to the effect of, he keeps asking me what I want him to do in order to build trust, in order to get better. And she's like, I don't want to tell him anything because I want him to figure out for himself what recovery looks like Like
Yeah.
what
Man
and what
up.
she's really saying is, I want him to be proactive with making the decisions of knowing that he's the acorn growing into an oak tree. And when he does that without me in the front, if he puts me in the peripheral and he goes after that target, I may not like everything he does, but I respect it. And I learn to trust it because he's doing it to not manipulate me. He's doing it to not like make me have to tell him he's a good boy. He's doing it because that's who he wants to be. And when he's moving towards a purpose that's bigger than himself, and he seems to be doing it without doing it to please me, that actually builds trust.
Okay.
It's internally driven between you and a higher power, and she's in the peripheral being a part of seeing whether or not that's sincere.
Okay.
Let me give you like a scenario. This is kind of a stupid scenario, but just to drive this point home. Let's say you went to a therapist with your wife. And in that session, the therapist said, Andy, I want you to stand on your head every day for 10 minutes. You need to stay. That's what's going to rebuild trust. And you're like, what? That's weird. That's stupid. That makes no sense. And let's say even between like you and God, it's kind of like this feels lame. Like what? But your wife, she drinks it in and she's like, well, the therapist said to stand on your head and I better see him standing on his head every day. What would you do?
Or stand on my head.
So in that, do you see the betrayal of self and truth for you? You're not showing up honest. You see that? So then you actually destroy trust in the relationship because you're not showing up honest in thinking that you're building trust by getting compliant with the request of the therapist and your wife. Do you see that?
Yeah.
So, but it's uncomfortable to stand in that truth sometimes, to be able to say, you know what, standing on my head doesn't work. I know the therapist said this. I know you feel like this is good for me. I'm sorry, but that doesn't work for me. I'm willing to do other things for my recovery, but that one doesn't sit right with me. That's showing strength. Not pride, but strength.
Let's practice this for a second, okay? Andy, you're talking to us here. We still got you for a couple more minutes. I'm a therapist, and I'm telling you from now on, Andy, this is one that has actually been asked of by a wife that I worked with. The listeners will know what I'm talking about. From now on, Andy, the only homework you have after this call is from now on, you need to pee sitting down. Let's role play it, Andy. What are you going to say?
Hey, there's no shame. By the way, I love doing that in the middle of the night because then I don't get stuff all over the seat.
Yeah.
But there's no shame in it. But if it's not your truth, go ahead.
Well, it might be your truth, but go ahead.
Why?
Well, because it'll show humility and because you won't touch your penis quite as much and put you at less risk of masturbating.
Huh.
You will totally rebuild trust with your wife.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I've seen this in real life. Like,
really?
I've seen this happen. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what to say. It just, all right. If I'm showing up for myself, honestly, I think that sounds pretty darn silly. I don't know how that will help me.
You're in total addict mode right now. You should be willing to do whatever I ask.
Oh gosh. That's really hitting me hard. Because you're right. I would, if you were honestly my therapist, I'd say yes, sir.
Right.
So you're actually, I like where you started there, Andy, and really what Brannon's getting at is that you can come back and say, hey, I see where you're trying to come from, and I see that you're hurt, and I see that you're worried, and I appreciate the feedback. And when I run it through, that's not going to work, and I don't think it'll actually work to build trust. I do want to become a better man. I do want to get sober. I do want to work on these things, but this one doesn't really work for me. That what Brannon's getting at is that the response will probably not be what you like. It might be like you're in addict mode, or you don't want to listen, or you don't, you're not humble enough, or whatever else. And if you principally are based in the right principles, and you hold the line and go, I get that. I see where you're worried. I still want to build trust. This just doesn't feel like the right way to do it. And you have principle behind it, that actually in the long term builds more trust than yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, because now Andy is going back and saying, let me think about that. That does feel right. Okay, I'm going to do it. Or that doesn't feel right. I'm going to be honest about it. And it's the honesty about it with the boundaries based on true principles that build trust. That's integrity.
Okay. This is all making so much more sense. It's really starting to come to fruition for me, honestly.
I'm going to give you some resources, Andy, so you can really drive home some of these points and principles for real recovery.
Okay.
Obviously, Wild at Heart, Tyler and I talk about it all the time. It's a great book. If you haven't read it or checked out John Eldredge, it's a good place to start for you. The other one is No More Mr. Nice Guy, Robert Glover. That would be a good one for you as well, right, Tyler? Do you think?
I think so.
Nice Guy,
mm-hmm.
Yeah. The third thing is, do everything you can to get your butt to the Rising Sun conference, because you need that work. You don't need. I shouldn't say this. Working with a therapist, going to groups, all those things, those are good.
You should keep doing that.
But something like the conference can shift your context and your energy as to how you apply those things to your recovery. So you have the right stuff underneath in order to create what you want to in your life as a man. So you can work into these things. You can learn this. We're not talking about heady work. We're talking about soul work. Your soul was hurt and is still hurting from your wounds, from your father wounds and other wounds. You need to shift that a little bit so that you can understand how loved you truly are. And when you do that, everything will change. It all will shift for you. And it's absolutely possible to do that. I've seen many, many people do it.
The goodness is already in there. You can feel it. You can hear it. It's already in there. So what Brannon's saying is exactly right. And I think you've actually had tastes of it and maybe just missed it. That's why I asked the question earlier about being loved when you felt like you didn't deserve it. Why not just accept that as love instead of having to use your head, figure out why it's not possible? Why not consider that your head is the part that's wrong and the love might be the right part? So anyway, Andy, I hope we didn't overwhelm you today. We're just about out of time. Any last thoughts on the way out today?
That was perfect. Thank you so much for the help.
Andy, you're the man. Thank you for coming on our show. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. For those of you guys listening, hopefully this is impactful. Hopefully it's got some things stirring up inside of you. We would love to hear from you if it does. If you feel like this would impact somebody that you love, please feel free to share it. And until next time, you guys, keep on keeping on.